The exact moment Jasmine Crockett faced off against Nancy Mace during a brutal congressional hearing on white privilege has now been seen by over 22 million people. This was not merely political theater. It turned personal the instant Mace looked Jasmine dead in the eye and stated, "You people are always causing trouble." The room froze. Crockett did not yell. She dismantled her, one calm, devastating sentence at a time. Because when a congresswoman says "you people" on national television, you must ask yourself, who gets to be we in America, and who does not? And more importantly, what happens when someone finally dares to answer? Stay with us. This story is worth every second of your time. The hearing opens, the air is tight. The war is not declared, but it has already begun. Generations of conflict had been witnessed by the Capitol's hearing chamber. Some whispered, others screamed. Today, it was both. From the outside, it appeared like another dry meeting of the House Oversight Committee, but inside the tension crackled like an exposed wire. On paper, the agenda was simple. A debate on the federal budget for racial equity programs in public education. But everyone in that room knew better. This was not about budget lines or policy briefs. It was about which version of America would be allowed to survive in the classroom. At one end of the dais, Representative Nancy Mace sat with the poise of someone accustomed to being on camera. Her folder was crisp, color-coded, and carefully placed beside a chilled bottle of water. She wore a spotless white blazer. The visual contrast was no accident. She had built her brand on walking the line, sharp enough to jab, polished enough to deflect the backlash. The moment the gavel struck, she leaned into the mic with surgical precision and spoke like a scalpel carving into soft tissue. "Let me be clear," she began, her voice clipped, confident, and calculated. "What's being sold to our children as progress is actually poison. Critical race theory does not teach facts. It teaches resentment. It does not promote unity. It plants division. It tells white children they're born to oppress and black children they're doomed to be oppressed. That is not education. That is not America." A few murmurs of agreement echoed from her side of the aisle. The camera light turned red. She was not just talking to the committee. She was talking to voters, to talk show producers, to history itself, and trying to rewrite it. Representative Jasmine Crockett did not move. She sat 2 chairs down, legs crossed, pen idle, lips pressed into a flat line. Where Mace looked curated, Crockett looked carved from conviction. A daughter of the South, a civil rights attorney turned congresswoman. Her hair was braided back tight, her expression tighter. Every inch of her posture said, "I've been through more than this room can throw at me." But her stillness was not passivity. It was pressure, coiled and waiting. Mace reached for a printed handout highlighted in red and held it up like a courtroom exhibit. "This," she snapped, "was found in a middle school curriculum funded with federal equity dollars. It teaches that capitalism was built on slavery, that police disproportionately target minorities, and that America's founding documents are rooted in white supremacy." She paused. "This is a taxpayer-funded guilt trip designed to shame white children for things they did not do." Another pause. This one longer, deliberate. "Let me ask the committee, when did education stop being about math and science and become a platform to punish kids based on the color of their skin?" She let the words hang, knowing they would land exactly where she intended. Across the room, Jasmine Crockett did not blink, but inside, something flared. Not rage, not yet. Something deeper, something older. It was not just the lie that stung. It was the ease with which it was spoken, the comfort, the confidence, the certainty in Mace's voice that her words would be met with nods, not consequences. Because that was privilege. That was the stage on which this entire hearing was being performed. Jasmine leaned back slightly, arms still crossed, eyes fixed on the woman across from her. She had seen this play out too many times before, in courtrooms, in faculty meetings, in Sunday school curriculum. And always the script was the same. Erase the pain. Protect the pride. Mace continued, her voice rising like a closing argument sharpened by polls, not principle. "If we really care about kids, black, white, or otherwise, then we need to stop teaching them that America is broken. We need to teach them to rise, not to resent. We need to stop spending federal dollars on lessons that divide us by race and start investing in what unites us." Another wave of polite applause from her side. Her smile was subtle, confident. She believed she had just won the room. But Jasmine Crockett was not clapping. She was not even blinking. Because when someone builds a platform on revisionist history, all it takes is one voice armed with truth to burn the whole thing down. But just when the room thought Mace had finished, just as pens dropped and shoulders began to settle, she leaned forward slightly, smiling, and delivered the line that would detonate everything. She did not shout. She did not have to. Her words landed like a coated missile, wrapped in calm. You people always act like America owes you something. Maybe if you stopped blaming white privilege and started working harder, we wouldn't be in this mess. There it was. Not just a dog whistle, a full siren. Not just a feint, a fencing. The chamber stilled. The shuffling stopped. The oxygen left the room, and something colder took its place. Jasmine did not flinch, but her pen stopped. Her spine straightened. Her eyes rose from the yellow pad like a storm-breaking surface. "Excuse me," she said, voice low and dangerously steady. "Did you just say, you people?" No gasps, just a ricochet of glances. Aide to aide, staffer to staffer. Everyone knew they had crossed into dangerous ground. Mace did not retreat, did not rephrase. She smiled, shrugged, then she doubled down. "That's right. You people are always causing trouble." Huh. A pen dropped. A chair creaked. A congressional aide sucked air through his teeth. The chairwoman did not speak, but her glance toward the Democratic bench said it all: brace yourselves. But Jasmine did not react. She absorbed. This was not silence. It was prelude, the kind of pause before the crack of thunder. Jasmine's eyes did not blink. She stared straight at Mace, her hands still neatly folded. But there was something seismic happening behind her calm. Not anger, memory. The kind of memory that does not fade with time, only burrows deeper. The memory of being followed in stores. Of hearing locks click as she walked past cars. Of being told to smile more in meetings. Of being told she was so articulate like it was a surprise. Of being told you people for years, just never on camera, never in Congress. And then she spoke. No trembling, no fire, just steel. "If my people are always causing trouble, Congresswoman, then why are we always the ones getting handcuffed, denied, undervalued, and underpaid?" She did not yell it. She measured it like a blade being drawn an inch at a time. Each word sharper than the last. The room did not erupt. It froze. Mace sat back, unsure whether to interrupt or ignore. But there was no ignoring what had just been said. Not when it carried generations of withheld fury behind its restraint. No one moved. No one whispered. No one dared even check their phones. The moment was balancing on a razor's edge, and everyone in the room knew it. Because Jasmine Crockett had not just answered a slur. She had turned it into a mirror and made the whole room look. The silence was still hanging like a blade in the air when Jasmine moved, not abruptly, not theatrically, but with the deliberate grace of someone who had been here before. Her hand slid from the pad to the desk. Her pen made a faint clicking sound as it touched the wood. She did not look down. She did not even breathe differently. She just let the weight of that moment settle and then cracked it open. Her voice was steady, low, precise. It did not tremble, and it did not need volume to land like thunder. "I think it's time we stop pretending." She let that sentence hang just long enough to make everyone stop blinking. "It's time to talk honestly about something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Something many of you say isn't real because you've never had to live with it." Her eyes did not leave Mace's. But her words were not for her anymore. They were for every room like this one. It's called privilege. The word dropped like a gavel. And the truth is, some people never have to see what others live through. Not because it doesn't exist, but because it doesn't happen to them. No one moved. The air in the chamber shifted, lighter in some corners, heavier in others. Jasmine's voice never rose, but it coiled with power, like a storm whispering before it strikes. Privilege is when you can say something like, "you people," and not even realize what it means. It's thinking you're just telling the truth when really you're showing that you've never had to question your place in this country. She paused only for a heartbeat. "So, let's be honest. Let's talk about what happens when history gets changed. When people feel guilty just for seeing the truth, and when being comfortable matters more than being fair. The silence did not break because everyone in that room knew. They were not just listening to a response. They were watching someone speak a truth they could not ignore. Her voice did not rise, but the truth in it did. There was no fire in her tone, no fury in her delivery, only something far more unsettling, calm certainty. And when the weight of her words finally landed, she did not reach for outrage. She did not raise her hands or her voice. Instead, she reached for something colder, something heavier, proof. Because feelings can be ignored, twisted, or dismissed. But facts expose the cracks that polite conversation hides. Facts don't care who's offended. Facts turn silence into guilt. And facts, they make cowards out of denial. Jasmine leaned forward, not to grandstand, but to strike with surgical clarity. Her movements were quiet, almost too quiet for how loud the room felt. She opened a slim folder resting in front of her and slid out a few pages with the precision of someone handling evidence at a crime scene. The paper did not crinkle. Her hands did not shake. Her tone did not shift. But something in the atmosphere did, like the sound before a lightning strike. This was not a speech anymore. It was cross-examination, and the jury was the nation. "Let me start with school," she said, steady. A 14-year-old white student in Missouri brought a loaded handgun to school. Not a rumor, not a toy, a real gun. He was suspended for 5 days. No charges filed. The principal said it was handled internally. No police, no record, no mugshot. She looked up, not to provoke, just to make sure they were listening. Then she turned the page, eyes never leaving the microphone. Now, a 12-year-old black student in Florida brought a plastic water gun. A school toy. He was tackled by school security. The police were called. He was handcuffed in front of his classmates, shoved into the back of a cruiser. His mother was told he was now flagged in the juvenile justice system. The words dropped like stones, one after another. Heavy, cold, brutally clear. Same country, different consequences. And for what? For the color of a child's skin. That's not discipline. That's a message. She paused. Just enough for the truth to echo. Let's move to the job market. Another page turned. 2 resumes. Same degree, same GPA, same internships, same work experience. But one name says Josh Miller. The other says Deshaun Williams. She let the names hang in the air like a challenge. Josh got a 46% callback rate. Deshaun, 14%. Not because he was less qualified, but because someone saw the name and made a decision before the interview ever happened. Longer silence this time. Even the ambient noise, the shifting in chairs, the tapping of pens, had stopped. Jasmine did not slow down. She could not afford to. "And let's talk about housing," she said, sliding a final page to the top. A black family in Cincinnati had their home appraised at $110,000. They removed all the family photos, the African artwork, the books on black history. They asked a white friend to pretend to be the owner. The same house, the same neighborhood, the same furniture. The second appraisal. $160,000. She raised her eyes. That's a $50,000 difference for skin tone. It was no longer just quiet. It was tense. The kind of stillness that no one tries to break because deep down they know they are not ready for what comes next. Jasmine leaned in again, but this time her voice softened. Not weak, just quieter, sharper. Privilege is when you can afford to believe that isn't real because it's never happened to you. She did not need to yell it. That sentence was a mirror. It reflected everything. It's the ability to hear stories like these and still ask, "Are you sure it's about race?" That question isn't curiosity. It's avoidance. It's comfort trying to rewrite reality. She did not flinch, did not blink. She looked at the people in front of her, elected officials, lawyers, teachers, staffers, people who had the power to pretend this wasn't systemic. You see, for some of you, racism is a topic, a theory, a discussion point. For us, it's daily life. And when we speak about it, we're told we're imagining things. Now, the silence wasn't awkward. It was thick, heavy, indicting. If you need more proof, I have it. But the truth is, you already know. And with that, she let the silence stand, not because she had nothing left to say, but because she had said what needed to be heard. But as Jasmine's final sentence cut through the room, sharp as bone, deep as history, not everyone was ready to sit with it, especially not the one who had just been disarmed. Some truths don't just sting, they provoke. And that's when Nancy Mace made her move. She shifted forward in her chair like a fuse catching fire. Her voice jumped out, jagged and rushed, slicing across the tension like a dull blade. That's not fair. It was meant to stop the momentum, to regain control, to fracture the silence before it could settle too long in anyone's conscience. But her words barely made it past the second syllable before the chairwoman's gavel tapped once. Sharp, final. Congresswoman Mace, you'll have your opportunity to respond. But right now, she said, eyes narrowed, it's Representative Crockett's time. A hush swept over the room. Not relief, not submission. Something closer to respect, or maybe fear. Not of Crockett, but of what might come next, because no one had expected this black woman in a dark suit and calm eyes to take the hearing hostage without raising her voice once. But here she was, not just speaking, but commanding. Nancy Mace clenched her jaw and leaned back, visibly irritated, but said nothing. She folded her arms with the stiffness of someone who had just lost the air in their sails. The energy that had once flowed in her direction had turned, and now all eyes were shifting. Jasmine did not gloat. She did not smirk. She simply adjusted her mic a half-inch closer, took a breath that seemed to gather not just oxygen, but every insult, every dismissal, every time she had been talked over, belittled, or waved off in rooms like this. And then she leaned in, because the floor was finally hers, and she knew exactly what to do with it. She did not need to raise her voice. She did not need to shout or point. All she needed was the truth, and she held it in her hands like evidence at a trial where the nation was the jury. Slowly, she pulled out a clean, stapled document. The pages did not shake in her fingers because she was not nervous. She was focused, steady, a stillness that came not from calm, but from clarity, from years of carrying these numbers inside her, not just on paper, but in her bones. She laid the report gently on the table, turned it toward the committee, and spoke into the mic with the kind of precision that slices deeper than anger ever could. This is a report published by the U.S. Department of Justice last year. It's not a blog post. It's not an activist flyer. It's your government on record telling the story some of you refuse to hear. Her tone did not accuse. It revealed, each word like a brick being removed from the wall of denial. It found that Black Americans are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white Americans. That's not a feeling. That's not a theory. That's a statistic. And it's not new. She looked up, scanning the room, not for permission, but for accountability. Even when unarmed, even when not resisting, even when trying to run away, over and over again, the pattern is the same. One set of lives gets hesitation, the other gets bullets. She let that sit, not for drama, but because some truths need silence to sink in. Let's talk sentencing. Same crime, same substances, same criminal histories. But if you are a person of color, specifically Black or Latino, you will, on average, receive a sentence that is 30% longer than your white counterpart. She tapped the document lightly, not to emphasize, but to remind them, this is not her opinion. It's the government's own admission. You can take race off the application, off the courtroom transcript, off the parole board paperwork, but somehow it still finds its way into the outcome. Now the room was still, not respectfully, uncomfortably, like everyone knew they were hearing something they could no longer unhear. And here's what I need you to understand, she continued, her voice dropping just slightly, calmer, but heavier. White privilege doesn't mean white people never suffer. It doesn't mean your life has been easy. It doesn't mean you haven't earned what you have. She paused. And then came the sentence that seemed to shift the air in the room. White privilege isn't the privilege to never be wrong. It's the privilege to be forgiven when you are. Her words were clean, soft, but unrelenting, like water that wears down stone. It's the privilege of being seen as a person first. Not a problem. It's getting a second chance, a benefit of the doubt, a soft voice instead of a raised weapon. A few staffers exchanged quiet looks. One aide near the back bit the inside of his cheek. Another scribbled something, then stopped halfway through. Jasmine kept going. Slow, steady, lethal. Privilege is when a teenage white boy caught with pills is sent to rehab, but a black teenager with the same pills is sent to prison. It's when one parent gets told, let's help your son get back on track. And another gets told, your kid is a threat to public safety. Her hand rested on the document again. This time it wasn't to emphasize data. It was to anchor herself in something unshakable. The numbers don't lie, but too often we pretend they don't matter because they don't hurt you. Because they didn't happen to you. She looked around. Her eyes weren't angry. They were tired, focused, worn by experience, but sharpened by purpose. White privilege is not the ability to do wrong. It's the ability to recover from it. It's the ability to survive it. It's the ability to be seen as human after you've failed. And then she paused. Not for applause, not for permission, just long enough to let the truth take root. The truth is, we all make mistakes, but only some of us get to come back from them. The silence that followed was heavier than before, not because of tension, but because of recognition. Because the facts were no longer just numbers on a page. They were a mirror, and everyone in the room was staring into their own reflection. She hadn't stormed out. She hadn't pointed fingers. She hadn't cried. But somehow Jasmine Crockett had left the entire hearing chamber feeling like a fire had rolled through it, quietly, but completely. And what no one inside those marble walls fully understood at the time was this. They weren't the only ones who had heard her. Outside the Capitol, the world had been waiting. People were scrolling, clicking, tapping, hungry for something real. And when that clip hit the internet, just under 2 minutes, no edits, no spin, it detonated. Jasmine's voice, calm but sharp, was now everywhere. Her words, white privilege is not the privilege to be right. It's the privilege to be forgiven when you're wrong. Didn't just trend. They echoed. They haunted. By the time the hearing adjourned, the video had already crossed 1 million views. The next morning, #1 on YouTube. Not an ad, not a music video, a congressional hearing, raw, unfiltered, real. In a small-town office in Missouri, a long-haul truck driver named Kevin had just pulled into a diner, 14 hours on the road. He sat in his cab, engine off, window cracked, scrolling through his feed while sipping gas station coffee. He wasn't looking for politics. He usually skipped it. But something in the headline stopped him, * Congresswoman drops truth on white privilege. Silences the room, * he clicked. He watched, then watched again. The words weren't angry, but they didn't flinch. They didn't let him look away. The statistics, the stories, the line about 2 resumes, one named Josh, one named Deshaun. He saw his own hiring decisions flash before him like a reel. And for the first time in years, he felt something move in his chest. He muttered, more to himself than anyone else, I'm white. I never really thought about it before. He took a long sip of coffee, looked down at his phone, and added, quiet this time, but I do now. In a high school classroom in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the day had started like any other. Desks creaked, backpacks dropped, students yawned. Miss Dillard had planned to run a unit on the First Amendment. But something about that hearing wouldn't leave her mind. She pulled up YouTube, loaded the clip, connected the projector. This is what real testimony looks like. She said, voice steady, but urgent. I want you to listen. Not as students, as citizens. She hit play. The students didn't fidget. They didn't laugh. They listened. Jasmine's voice filled the room, not loud, but commanding. And when the clip ended, silence sat heavy in the classroom like fog. A boy near the back, 15 years old, black, lanky, quiet, raised his hand. He didn't look angry, just unsure. If they call her you people, he asked, what do they call me? The question didn't need an answer. It was the answer. Mrs. Dillard swallowed hard. She'd taught for 20 years and never heard it put that way. She clicked the screen off, not to avoid the conversation, but to make room for it. In Georgia, a retired firefighter watched the clip on his back porch, sunlight catching in his glass of iced tea. 68. White. A veteran of more than one kind of fire. Voted Republican all his life, served his community, raised his kids right. But he couldn't stop replaying Jasmine's words, it's not about who suffers. It's about who survives their mistakes, that hit him hard. He thought about the kid in his neighborhood who shoplifted a candy bar and got locked up. He'd been black. The white kid who did the same. His parents got a warning. Boys will be boys, that's what they'd said. He remembered that now, clear as day. And it wasn't rage he felt. It wasn't guilt. It was clarity. That kind of truth that doesn't scream but sinks into your chest and stays there. He picked up his phone, typed a message to his son, watch this. You need to see this. We all do, Across the country, in kitchens, laundromats, staff rooms, waiting rooms, the clip kept playing over and over again. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but people leaned in when it played like they didn't want to miss a word. In Detroit, a mother watching during her break between shifts texted her sister, she said what we've been saying for years, only now they're finally hearing it. In Boise, Idaho, a school counselor cried quietly at her desk. In New York, a subway musician played a melody and whispered Jasmine's name between sets. The clip had gone beyond viral. It had gone personal. And the most extraordinary part? Jasmine didn't know. Not yet. She was still in her office, phone buzzing off the hook. Her team tried to keep up with the flood, emails, voicemails, messages. Some were angry, a few were threats, but most were just this, thank you. Thank you for saying it. Thank you for not blinking. Thank you for not shouting, but also not backing down, and so the ripple moved, not like a wave crashing, but like a pulse, steady and unstoppable. One person at a time, one mind changed, one blind spot exposed, one heart cracked open, not by force, but by truth. The country had moved, shifted, not with earthquakes or riots, but with something quieter, and in many ways more permanent, recognition. But as America leaned in to reckon with what had been said, one voice, the one who lit the match, had gone quiet. For 7 days, Nancy Mace said nothing. Not a tweet, not a press release, not a morning show appearance. Her team fielded calls with generic statements, no comment at this time. Congresswoman Mace is focusing on legislative priorities. We'll respond when appropriate, but the silence wasn't strategy. It was retreat. Outside her office in South Carolina, a row of reporters had camped out on the sidewalk, their cameras humming in the thick southern air. Microphones were raised every time she passed by. Her team shuffled her quickly into cars, elevators, private doors. And yet every time, someone asked the same question. It hung in the air longer than the woman who refused to answer it. Congresswoman Mace, do you regret saying you people? Some asked gently, some shouted. One reporter, an older black woman from Charleston, simply held up a printed quote and asked, do you still stand by these words? But Mace never stopped, never paused. She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because the silence was doing it for her. Behind the scenes, her allies were scrambling. Some tried to excuse the phrase, she didn't mean it that way. It was taken out of context, others shifted blame, this is just political theater. Critical race theory is the real issue, but none of it landed, because no spin could drown out the one sound that now defined her week. Jasmine Crockett's voice, and the echo of a room that went dead silent after 3 words. Inside the Capitol, the tension lingered. Colleagues passed Mace with polite nods, but not many lingered. Some openly avoided her. One staffer whispered, she's radioactive now. Even her supporters were on edge. Not because they didn't agree with her politics, but because she'd lost control of the story. And Jasmine? Jasmine said nothing. No interviews, no victory lap, no headline-grabbing rebuttals. Her phone was full, colleagues, celebrities, activists, strangers, all asking for another quote, another strike. But she didn't give them one. Instead, she posted a single photo, black and white, grainy but sharp. No caption. It showed Jasmine standing in the center of the hearing room, back straight, hands calm at her sides, eyes locked with the camera like it was a witness she didn't trust, but dared not flinch from. The angle was low, the lighting unflattering, the emotion raw. Behind her, blurred in shadows, the outlines of the committee, some listening, some turning away, one leaning back with her arms crossed. Mace. The image went viral in under an hour. By nightfall, it had become an icon. Some called it the stare heard around the world, others the silence that spoke. On Reddit, someone wrote, "She didn't have to say anything. This photo is the statement." And maybe that's what made it powerful. Jasmine had spoken every necessary word inside that room. Outside it, she didn't need to chase the noise. She let the noise chase her. Meanwhile, Nancy Mace watched the world change from behind her office blinds. The clip wouldn't stop playing. Even when she turned the volume down, it was still there, on the hallway TV, on the phones of her interns, in the elevator conversations. She could feel it like a second heartbeat. Each time Jasmine spoke, measured, calm, surgical. It reminded Mace of the moment she lost the room. And not just the room, the country. One morning, she stared at her phone screen, thumb hovering over a draft tweet. Asterisk I was misunderstood. I never meant to offend, asterisk she deleted it. Tried another, being targeted by a political machine that didn't sit right either, because deep down she knew it wasn't her words that were twisted. It was the silence that followed them. Outside her district office, protesters began to gather. Not angry mobs, not screaming crowds, just people. Some held signs quoting Jasmine. Others held mirrors with the words, "Look again," written in thick black marker. She'd underestimated what one woman could do with facts, a steady voice, and a single moment of unflinching presence. And Jasmine. Still no comment. Still no follow-up. Still no press junket or CNN appearance. Just that photo. And somehow, it was louder than anything either of them had ever said. She hadn't said a word to the media. No sound bites, no interviews, no spin. But that black and white photo had done something most politicians' speeches never could. It held a mirror up to the nation. And now, days later, Jasmine Crockett wasn't standing in front of a committee or a camera. She was standing in front of the people, her people. In a packed community center in Dallas, the air felt heavier than usual. Not because of heat, but because everyone in that room knew something had changed. Jasmine hadn't just made a point. She'd drawn a line, and tonight everyone had come to see what side of it they stood on. The room was full before the sun even touched the horizon. Folding chairs packed elbow to elbow, rows stretching all the way to the back wall where volunteers had propped open the emergency exits to let in whatever breeze they could find. Retired teachers, high school students, single parents with toddlers on their laps, church deacons, deli workers, veterans with weathered caps. Some wore shirts that read, asterisk, "Truth isn't divisive, it's just uncomfortable." Asterisk others held homemade signs that said simply, asterisk, "We hear you." Asterisk. Jasmine stood just behind the curtain, staring down at the floor for a moment, her breath steady, her hands loose at her sides. No podium tonight, no script, just a microphone, a community, and a story that had already lit a fire across the country. Now it was time to bring it home. When she stepped onto the stage, the room rose, not in loud, celebratory applause, but in something deeper, respect, recognition. A standing silence broken only by a few claps that slowly grew until the space filled with a warmth that was louder than cheers. Jasmine didn't wave. She didn't smile. She stood there for a moment, just breathing, just looking. Then she took the mic in both hands like it was something sacred. When she spoke, her voice didn't echo. It wrapped around the room like a thread pulling everyone a little closer. "I didn't come here tonight to go viral," she began, her voice calm and low. "I didn't come here to trend or to clap back or to collect likes." The room stayed silent but leaned in. You could feel bodies shift, hearts open, chairs creak. "I came here to speak plain, and sometimes plain talk cuts deeper than speeches ever could." She looked out over the crowd, her eyes scanning every face like they mattered equally. And they did. She gestured toward the back wall where the projector had frozen the now famous image of her in the hearing room, eyes locked forward, unflinching, unmoved. "They said I didn't respond, but that was my response. Because sometimes the strongest thing a black woman can do is stand still and not blink." A few people clapped. Others nodded, but most just listened. And Jasmine wasn't finished. "What I said in that room wasn't radical. It was reality. It wasn't new. It's been whispered at kitchen tables, in church basements, over the phone after someone got pulled over again. What made it different this time was that somebody finally heard it outside the neighborhood. She paused, not for effect, but for air. The weight of this wasn't rehearsed. It was lived. And now I want to say something else. Something I need to say, not to Congress, but to you. The mic crackled slightly as she stepped closer to the front of the stage. She didn't raise her voice, but she didn't need to. Every word came out clear and cutting. America doesn't need to apologize for having white privilege, but it does need to see it. It needs to name it, and it needs to decide if we're brave enough to move past it together. That line landed like thunder, soft, but shaking the floor beneath people's feet. Privilege isn't just about money or power. It's about who gets the benefit of the doubt. Who gets to be seen as complicated instead of dangerous. Who gets another shot when they mess up, and who gets erased. Her tone shifted slightly now, more force behind it. Not anger, urgency. I'm not asking anyone to carry guilt. I'm asking you to carry truth. Because if we keep flinching every time someone names what's broken, we'll never fix a damn thing. In the second row, a woman gripped her husband's hand. In the back, a man in his 70s wiped his cheek without drawing attention. No one looked away. Not from Jasmine. Not from themselves. We say this country is a place of second chances. That's what we teach. That's what we sell. But what kind of second chance is it when only certain people are allowed to make the first mistake? Jasmine let the silence answer for her. Then she delivered the line that would follow her forever. We don't need shame. We need vision. We don't need more denial. We need more courage. And we sure as hell don't need to keep pretending that we all start from the same place when the finish line keeps moving. The room didn't move, didn't breathe. It was the kind of moment that presses itself into the walls, into people's bones. A woman in the back started clapping. Then a man near the center stood. Then two more. And then it was everyone. Folding chairs scraped back. People rose, not for applause, for acknowledgement, for alignment, for something deeper than agreement. Jasmine didn't raise her hands. She just stood there, hands still on the mic, eyes still forward. You don't fix a thing by ignoring it. You fix it by seeing it, by saying its name, and by deciding, not someday, not next election, but right now, what kind of country we want to be. The applause didn't explode. It built like water rising behind a dam that had finally cracked. People clapped, not because they were moved, but because they were changed. And in that sound, Jasmine Crockett didn't hear celebration. She heard readiness. By the time the applause had faded from the walls of the Dallas Community Center, the rest of the country was already reacting. Jasmine Crockett's words, delivered without a single teleprompter or soundbite rehearsal, had done what months of campaign slogans could not. It pierced through the static of American politics. Her voice didn't just trend. It fractured the timeline. Within hours, her quote was clipped, captioned, subtitled, reposted, debated, and dissected. By morning, the video of her saying,